Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. This is Ahmad, and I wanted to take this lesson to review lessons 1 to 3 and just make sure everyone's on the same page, understanding exactly what we're talking about, so that as we're moving forward, everyone is still on the same page and no one is lost. So if you guys remember, in lesson 1 we took intro to HTML, and in lesson 2 we took intro to CSS. And in lesson 3, we took intro to JavaScript, right? And the reason why we just briefly and quickly introduced these 3 points, or these 3 components working together, is because going forward, as we're learning HTML, these 3 are always going to be bundled in the picture, and we're going to be using all 3. So the purpose behind quickly and briefly introducing them is just so that you could understand where these pieces fall and how and what they do, right? And then later on, we're going to, of course, expand our knowledge more in HTML and expand our knowledge more in CSS and expand our knowledge more in JavaScript. But I just want to quickly introduce to you guys where those things go, what they do, and how they look like. And then now going forward after this review, if you are confused about anything, the way we do the videos here on this channel is that you can rewatch them over and over. There's no repetitive, boring, long videos, long content. Each video can be watched over and over until it clicks in your head, right? So this lesson, we're gonna stop, just review all the 3 lessons that we took so far, make sure everyone understands the role of each of these 3 pieces, and then later on in future lessons, me and you are going to expand our knowledge in each one of those components, right? So let's start off by opening our code editor and making a brand new file, right? And here's a blank file, and then as we said before, on the bottom we can choose what language we're coding in. This is going to tell our text editor, our code editor, how to color the syntax, how to give us those, those fancy little colors and help us out with writing down our tags. So as we said before, we always start by putting our document type, right? Our doc type HTML. And we said the reason for this is that regardless of what browser or what code editor opens this file in the future, automatically it knows from this first line that what I'm reading is HTML code. So it's useful in that sense. Even though it's not needed, you can take this off, but it's better practice to have it. The first tag that we're going to have, as we said, is the HTML tags, right? And you have the opening tag and the closing tag. And the reason why we need both the opening and the closing is, as we said, everything in HTML has to be within its tags, right? So HTML, everything that's included in our HTML code must be inside the HTML tags. If I have anything written outside of them, then it's not going to be rendered or viewed as HTML code. So everything has to be inside of it. Within the main HTML tags, you have 2 main elements. The first is head, and we said that our scripting and our styling goes in here. And in lesson 2, we put our styling, our CSS, inside the head. And in lesson 3, we put our scripting, our JavaScript, inside the head. So this is where that goes. Again, everything that we want that's considered styling or scripting must be inside the head for it to be given that functionality, right? And then the second main element is the body tags, right? And this, as we said, is where our HTML code goes, but also what displays and shows on our website or to the user, right? So if I have, H1 here, it's not really going to render because it must be inside the body for it to be viewed as content that they need to display onto the website, okay? So let's get that concept drilled in our heads, that the idea of opening and closing tags, and that if you want a certain functionality to be applied, it must be inside its respected tags. So let's start with writing HTML code to put elements or tags onto the website and for the user to see. And as we said, it must be inside the body tags. So let's add a very simple element, right? Because we only took a few HTML elements so far. And as we learn and grow, we're going to take more and more HTML elements and get excited for that, guys. So the first one we have is H1. And again, if I want the functionality or the formatting of H1 to be applied to a certain text, it must be inside these 2 tags, the opening and the closing. I'm just going to write a basic hello world text, and that's going to be inside the H1, so it's going to be given the functionality of an H1. H1 again, guys, is a header tag, And we said that H1, when we search on W3 Schools or another HTML documentation website, that it says headers could be H1 to H6, and each one getting smaller in its size, right? So here's a basic HTML code, and all we have on it is a header. So we said when we save our file, we could do save as, and we're going to save it onto our desktop just so we can have it easily accessible, but you can save it absolutely anywhere you want. So let's save. As it's saving, we'll wait for it to pop up here. It's taking a while. Did I save it? Yeah. Okay, so there it pops up. Let's open it in our browser, and you can see our website has that huge header right smack on the top, says hello world, right? Let's go back into our code and let's put a p tag, right? P is an HTML element that simply is a paragraph, right? Provides basic formatting to text. So we're just going to put this is a example paragraph. Save it, and we go back to our browser and refresh, and then we see our paragraph slapped on for us, right? So we see the HTML tags within the body of the HTML and how it's represented and shown on the screen. And then one more element that we took, guys, was the button tag, right? And here we need an ID, right? And we'll talk about what the ID does when we talk about JavaScript later, but we're just going to call it my button. And as we said, IDs can be absolutely anything you want. You just have to make it unique. So I can't have two elements on the page with the ID my button. They have to be unique, and they have to be one. And in the middle, we're going to say what we want inside of the button. So we're just going to say click me. We're going to save here, and we're going to refresh here, and there we see our button with the text click me. And when we click it, nothing happens, but that's going to happen later when we play with JavaScript. So we see the role of HTML. HTML, guys, again, is displaying content on the screen. That's its sole responsibility. Everything else is going to be handled in either CSS or in JavaScript. But we see the role of the bot of HTML code here. And as we said before, as lessons go on, we're going to take more and more of these HTML elements, such as tables, such as images, such as spans, such as div, such as the endless list of these HTML elements. We're going to take them future. The second point, or in lesson 2, we took intro to CSS, and we discussed, hey, if we want to give our HTML elements that are displayed on the page a special design or a special look or a special feel, that is done through CSS or styling, right? And we discussed that styling goes again inside the header tags. So if I want to apply styling, I go into the head and I put the style tags. Again, guys, you cannot put the style tags in the body and then wonder, hey, why isn't my style working? There's a place and a position for each one of these tags, and for style, it's inside the head, which is inside the HTML tags, right? So we have our style. Now we said there is a way to reference our elements so that we can apply styling to them, right? And we even discussed, just to review, how we have inline styling, right? Where we can put style right inside the opening tags of the element you're working on, right? And then you can put style, and then you can put, for example, color red. And then you'll see your header become red. But we said that this is not best practice because our code is going to grow enormously, and then we have our CSS code inside our HTML code, so it's kind of getting sloppy and disorganized, right? So we discussed of putting the style in the header and having to reference the elements in 3 different ways in order for styling to be applied to them, right? The first is referencing the element directly. So I can just say H1, right? And then I put my opening and closing curly braces and say color red. And what this is going to do is going to look at the page to see if there's any H1s. And for all the H1s, it's going to apply a red coloring. So say, for example, if I put, another H1 on the page, our CSS automatically is going to apply that red coloring to it because the code is saying any H1, I want you to apply a red coloring to it, right? And we said the second way for you to reference an element in the CSS to apply the styling onto your page is by the use of IDs. So for example, our button here, right? Let's just say we want to apply a special design to it and only have for this button. I can say pound, right? And that's going to basically look for anything with the ID of, and we're going to name it my button, right? Because that's our ID. And we're going to do, of course, again, opening and closing curly braces. And then everything inside of these braces is going to be the styling that we're going to apply to this button, right? So we're just going to put background color of blue, right? So this is going to look for anything with the ID of my button. It happens to be this button right here. And then it's going to give it the black background color of blue. So let's refresh, and we see that it has a background color now of blue. And we said the third way that you're going to reference elements on your HTML page with CSS is by the use of classes, right? So let's just say I go to this P, right, and I give it a class of, my text, right? It can, again, these classes and these IDs can be absolutely anything you want to name it. You can just name it whatever you want. So, and we said the way for you to reference a class in CSS is by putting period and then the class name. In this instance, it's my text. Again, you have your opening and closing curly braces, and we're going to say what is the styling that we want to apply for this. So let's do text decoration, and we're going to say underline like we did last time. Save, and then we refresh, and we see our text now has this underline under the paragraph. And then we also discussed, okay, we see the benefit of why we wouldn't want to do referencing the element directly, because maybe we want something applied to one of my headers but not all of my headers. But what is the difference between using an ID and class? Well, again, ID must be unique. So I cannot use this ID again and put it here and expect my styling here to be applied, because only one thing can have the ID my button. However, as for class, many things can have the class of my text and it can be applied. So the best way you can think of it is ID is for uniqueness, right? If you only want one specific thing to have a certain style, you use your ID. And if you want, a couple of things like buttons, for example, you want all the buttons on your page or all the images on your page to look the same, you would use the class, right? So that's basic CSS and how it falls and how we use it in our HTML pages. And again, the same way we said we're going to take more and more HTML elements as we learn more code, the same applies to CSS styling. Me and you are going to take so many CSS rules, such as background color, font family, font design, size, width, height, padding, margins, so many different properties we can use in CSS. Me and you are going to learn them as we advance in our knowledge. And the third and final piece that me and you took is JavaScript. And we discussed that JavaScript goes inside the head, but not, within the style tags, but has its own script tag, right? And then within it, we're going to have our JavaScript code. We discussed that in order for JavaScript code to be called from your HTML, you have to have a function calling it, right? So let's just say for our button, we have to have an on-click function, meaning when someone clicks on this button, I want you to call my JavaScript, right? JavaScript's not going to be automatically applied. You have to reference it and call it, right? So let's just go in our script and let's make our function. So we're going to use the keyword function. You always have to write that for your scripts. And then we're going to give our function a name, and we can name it whatever we want. We're going to call it pop-up, right? And then we need our parentheses, open and close. The same way we need function, we need parentheses after the name of the function. And then we have our opening and closing curly braces again, signifying that everything that's enclosed or within this function has to be inside of these curly braces. So what we're going to do is a basic pop-up that's gonna trigger to the user, right? And we said we can use the basic function that's provided by JavaScript by default called alerts, right? And we can put parentheses and then within them we put quotations, and then we put whatever message that we want. So we're just going to say, hi, welcome to my site, right? And then we have to go back to our HTML and somehow call the function. And the way you do that is by, for example, with the button, we're going to use the onClick function, because we're going to say when someone clicks on the button, I want you to return the function name, right? So this is saying when someone clicks on this button, return, basically go to the function called popup. So it's going to come into this code and execute this line of code. Again, the same way we discussed with HTML and CSS, alert is literally 0.1% of JavaScript. Me and you are going to learn so many different functions and rules and variables and, you know, neat little things we can do inside JavaScript, and we're going to learn that piece by piece as we're growing. But this is just a basic line of JavaScript. So let's save. Let's go back to our browser and refresh, and let's click our button, and bam, we see our function executed, and it's basically just showing a pop-up that says, hi, welcome to my site. And that is exactly what we took the first 3 lessons, reviewing them, showing how everything connects together. And guys, please be excited, because we have not even scratched the surface of what knowledge lies out there for HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. I, again, just wanted to introduce each one of these pieces to you guys, seeing how they work and where they go, and then me and you are going to grow our knowledge exponentially in each one of these pieces by going through step by step of everything that's going on. Please, if you didn't understand anything from lesson 1 to 4, which is this lesson, please watch the video over and over until it kind of clicks in your head. And just a note of advice for everyone: practice makes perfect, right? So the more examples you do on your own, and the more videos you watch going forward, and the more examples me and you work on together, the better you are going to get at coding, and the more familiar and the more it's going to make sense, right? So don't be overwhelmed by things not making 100% sense. This is a new language to everyone, so please be patient and be confident and keep watching these videos, and I'll see you guys soon. Peace out.